Picture this. It's August in Okarche, Oklahoma. It is 104 degrees outside.
Oh man, that's just brutal heat.
Yeah, exactly. The kind of oppressive, suffocating heat that just like sits on your chest the second you step out the door. So inside this sweltering house, there's a homeowner who is desperate.
Right, because his daughter has asthma. I mean, the stakes are incredibly high here.
Exactly. Inside that house, the heat is crossing the line from uncomfortable to, genuinely dangerous. And he's been out in this heat for 2 full days, just sweating, trying to fix his broken central air conditioning.
Which is a nightmare scenario for anyone.
It really is. But the thing is, he's convinced he has it figured out. He calls an HVAC technician just to come out, verify his work, maybe top off the refrigerant. He actually tells the tech on the phone, like, I'm almost done. You'll only need to be here 30 minutes.
Right, 30 minutes. Famous last words.
Literally. Because when that technician pulls into the driveway, he takes one look at the AC unit and realizes they are not 30 minutes away from a fix. They are looking at a full-on 2-day disaster.
Just a little mess.
Yeah. So, welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at this incredible reflection from Master HVAC technician Dave Hartzell. It's from a piece he calls The Human Diagnostic, specifically an entry titled 2 Hours into a 2-Day Problem.
And, we're pairing his notes from that driveway in Oklahoma with a landmark 1999 psychology paper by David Dunning and Justin Kruger.
Right. And our mission today is to explore this really fascinating, often completely misunderstood gap between perceived competence and actual competence.
We really want to figure out why. Like, when we're doing something entirely new, our own minds actively hide our incompetence from us.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because when Dave Hartzell stepped out of his truck in that 104-degree heat, the reality of what he found was just fundamentally disconnected from the homeowner's confidence.
Oh, completely disconnected. I mean, the physical setup Dave walked into was just a textbook example of catastrophic, well-intentioned failure.
The guy met him right in the driveway, right?
Yeah, drenched in sweat, pointing to the condenser unit with the cover taken off. Now, on the phone, this homeowner had used all the correct industry vocabulary.
Yeah.
Like, he told Dave he had replaced the thermostat, the contactor, the capacitor, and a high-voltage relay.
He sounded like he knew exactly what he was doing.
He really did. He was visibly proud. He had bought the parts online, he studied the DIY videos, and he said to Dave right there in the driveway, I've done most of the work, so this should be quick.
But the actual state of the machinery was, well, a very different story.
A very dangerous story. Knowing the terms is one thing, but, the execution is where the hazard lies. The notes describe a system that was essentially a fire hazard waiting to happen.
Wait, really? Like, how bad was it?
Well, Dave's examination revealed just a series of mechanical nightmares. Like, the new capacitor the homeowner had bought was just sitting loose on top of the unit, wired completely backward.
Wiring it backward? I mean, I don't know much about HVAC. What does that actually do?
So to understand why that matters, a capacitor is basically a massive temporary battery. It gives the compressor the massive jolt of electricity it needs to start up.
Okay, got it.
So wiring it backward isn't just like a minor oops. It can violently destroy the compressor or cause the capacitor itself to literally burst.
Oh, wow. That's terrifying.
And that wasn't all. Then there was the contactor. That's a heavy-duty relay switch that handles the massive electrical load required to run the system. The homeowner had installed one rated for the wrong amperage entirely.
So what happens when it's the wrong amperage?
If an undersized contactor tries to pull that much current, the metal contacts can literally weld themselves shut from the intense heat, meaning the AC would never shut off and it would eventually burn out the entire system.
Just a complete meltdown. And it wasn't just the high voltage stuff outside, right? The low voltage wiring inside the house was just as messed up.
Yeah, Dave looked at the thermostat wiring at the air handler, and it had been aggressively yanked out. The delicate control wires were simply balled up together and wrapped in thick layers of electrical tape.
Which is exactly what you're not supposed to do.
Right. It guarantees miscommunication between the thermostat and the unit, or worse, it just shorts out the whole control board.
And to top it all off, the main breaker was off, and the homeowner was standing there physically holding a multimeter, which is the tool used to measure voltage, and he didn't even know how to turn it on.
Let alone read what it was saying.
Right. So it's really tempting to look at a guy holding a tool he can't use, standing next to a machine he has practically destroyed, and just write him off as arrogant.
Oh, totally. People often assume this kind of failure stems from a prideful refusal to admit ignorance, like a stubborn dad thing.
Exactly. But reading Dave's reflection, arrogance isn't the driver here at all. It makes me think of an analogy. Imagine you spend a week learning how to say, "Where is the bathroom?" and, "I would like a coffee" in a foreign language.
Okay, I'm following you.
You memorize the phonetic sounds perfectly, but because you can pronounce those two phrases, you suddenly believe you are equipped to fly to a foreign capital and negotiate a high-stakes corporate trade agreement.
Right.
You possess the vocabulary, the words capacitor and contactor, but you lack the actual language of electrical engineering. The homeowner genuinely believed that possessing the vocabulary was synonymous with possessing the mechanical skill.
That analogy is spot on. The distinction between vocabulary and fluency is crucial here, and it really requires a high degree of empathy to understand.
Empathy is a big part of Dave's whole approach here.
Yes, Dave is very deliberate in pointing out that this homeowner was a kind man in a terrifying situation. I mean, his daughter was sick, the house was baking.
And he was probably dealing with the financial pressure of trying to avoid some huge emergency repair bill.
Exactly. The fear he felt was absolutely real. The grueling physical effort he put in over 2 days in the Oklahoma sun, that was real.
The only thing that wasn't real was his competence.
Right. His immense confidence in that driveway wasn't born out of narcissism. It was this potent mix of father's protective bravado and a deeply rooted, genuine misperception of how close he actually was to a working system.
But if the danger of the welded contactor and the backward capacitor was that profound, you have to wonder, why didn't his brain throw up a single red flag while he was taping those wires together?
You'd think he'd notice something was off.
Yeah. He had visual confirmation of his own work, yet he felt entirely secure. And that specific blind spot is exactly what Dunning and Kruger were measuring.
That's the crux of it. The brain cannot flag an error that it lacks the framework to understand. That is the core finding of David Dunning and Justin Kruger's 1999 paper.
They tested subjects in some very specific domains, right?
Yeah, they conducted a series of 4 experiments, testing subjects in grammar, logical reasoning, and humor recognition. They would have participants take a test and then ask them to evaluate how well they believe they performed compared to everyone else.
And the results were pretty surprising.
Very. Across the board, they found a persistent, counterintuitive pattern. The people who scored in the absolute bottom quartile, like the worst performers, consistently rated their own performance as being in the top half.
Wait, so is this just the scientific way of saying dumb people think they're smart? Because you hear the Dunning-Kruger effect thrown around constantly online to call people stupid.
I know, it's everywhere. But that is the most common and tragic misunderstanding of their work. The Dunning-Kruger effect is absolutely not a measure of general intelligence.
It has nothing to do with IQ, right?
Nothing at all. The researchers were measuring a specific cognitive function called metacognition. Metacognition is the mind's ability to evaluate its own performance, thinking about thinking.
Right.
What's fascinating here is that the exact same knowledge required to perform a given task well is the exact same knowledge required to recognize that the task has not been performed well.
Oh, that makes so much sense. The skill itself and the ability to judge the skill are constructed from the exact same mental models.
Exactly. If you don't possess the mental model of what a safe, properly calculated electrical load looks like, you literally cannot perceive that the balled-up, taped-together wires in front of you are a hazard.
You will step back, look at the mess you just made, and it will look perfectly acceptable to you. Because the standard of measurement required to evaluate the work is the exact knowledge you lack.
You are blind to your own mistakes because the diagnostic tool you need to see them is the expertise you haven't built yet. And the absence of expertise doesn't feel like a void to the person experiencing it. It feels like certainty.
That's wild. It feels like certainty.
Yeah. The homeowner looked at a backward capacitor and a wrong amperage contactor. And without the metacognitive ability to evaluate the electrical reality of those components, his brain simply confirmed that the physical objects matched the shapes he saw online.
And honestly, most of us have experienced this from the inside, even if we don't realize it. Like, have you ever tried to confidently give feedback on a colleague's project in a different department?
Oh, sure. Or argued a political point after reading just one article.
Yes. Only to realize years later that you didn't even understand the foundational rules of the topic. But when you are inside that initial deficit of knowledge, there is no internal alarm bell ringing to warn you.
Because the alarm bell requires data to trigger it. The Dunning-Kruger effect highlights that incompetence isn't just the inability to do a thing, it is the inability to recognize that you cannot do the thing. It's a double burden.
Which raises a really crucial question about our modern environment. If human neurology naturally creates this metacognitive blind spot when we encounter new domains, why are we seeing these severe DIY disasters so frequently right now?
Well, the variable that has changed is our media consumption.
Exactly. When Dave Hartzell finally had to sit this desperate father down and explain that his 30-minute verification was actually going to be a 6 to 7 hour rebuilding job, the homeowner was just devastated.
He was crushed.
And his response to Dave was, "The videos made it look so easy." And Dave noted that this single sentence defines our current era. He said it should be carved over every hardware store parts counter in the country.
The videos made it look so easy is like the anthem of the modern DIY catastrophe. It highlights this incredibly powerful, almost dangerous illusion created by on-demand instructional content.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because we have to separate the act of mimicking a visual sequence from the act of actually possessing a skill.
That's a huge distinction.
The homeowner wasn't lying when he said he did what the video showed. He watched a technician on YouTube turn a wrench on a contactor, and he went outside to his condenser and turned a wrench.
They match the shapes.
He watched a wire get attached, and he attached a wire. The physical choreography was replicated. He could visually confirm that his hands had completed the motions. But the mechanical failure cascade we talked about earlier still happened.
This brings us to Dave Hartzell's concept of pattern memory, which is the invisible defining variable that video completely strips away.
Pattern memory. Tell me more about that.
So, when you watch a polished instructional video, you are consuming a highly curated sequence filmed by a professional. These are technicians working on systems they have diagnosed and repaired thousands of times.
And they edit the videos, too.
Heavily edited. The editor removes all the pauses. They cut out the 10 minutes where the technician stops, reconsiders a reading on the multimeter, traces a wire back to the board, and, realizes a secondary short is causing the primary failure.
Right. All the friction of troubleshooting is just left on the cutting room floor.
Exactly. The viewer is left with a deceptive straight-line narrative from a broken machine to a fixed machine.
And our brains naturally rely on mirror neurons and visual mimicry. We are wired to learn by watching others.
So the viewer watches this seamless sequence, and their brain falsely equates, like, I can mimic these physical motions with, I possess the underlying engineering skill.
But the skill that allows the technician in the video to move so confidently wasn't generated in a 10-minute recording session.
No, it was forged over something like 40,000 individual service calls. That technician has an internal database of exceptions, failures, edge cases, and sensory inputs, like the smell of a burnt relay or the sound of a struggling compressor.
While the homeowner has a database of exactly one sequence, he doesn't have the pattern memory to distinguish between a successful repair and a dangerous mimicry.
A video can transfer the sequence of motions, but it cannot transfer the historical context required to evaluate the system when a variable changes.
It totally bypasses our natural risk assessment centers. Like, if this homeowner had attempted to fix an air conditioner in 1985 with no internet, his brain would have immediately registered his total lack of knowledge.
Oh, absolutely. The sheer mystery of the metal box would have triggered caution.
But the video provided a false map. It gave him just enough visual data to bypass caution and jump straight to the peak of Mount Stupid, which is the colloquial term for that early spike in confidence described by Dunning and Kruger.
Yeah, Mount Stupid.
Yeah.
But, the 1999 paper doesn't just focus on beginners. There is a secondary finding in Dunning and Kruger's research that completely inverts how we should think about competence, especially when we're trying to hire or evaluate experts.
Right. The effect operates on a curve, and it goes in both directions.
It does, and this is so often ignored in popular discussions of the study. While the bottom quartile massively overestimates their performance, Dunning and Kruger found that the top quartile, the participants who actually possess deep, verifiable expertise, consistently underestimated themselves.
They rated their own performance more modestly than the data showed they should have. On the surface, that seems kind of contradictory. Like, if they possess the metacognitive tools to evaluate the skill, shouldn't they know exactly how superior their performance is?
They do, but the metacognition is functioning at a much higher, broader level here. This is often referred to as the curse of knowledge.
The curse of knowledge, okay.
When you spend enough time inside a complex domain, whether that is diagnosing HVAC systems, performing neurosurgery, or, writing complex software architecture, you become acutely aware of the infinite variables.
You see the sheer vastness of the field.
Exactly. You learn the 1,000 different ways a system can fail catastrophically. So the expert isn't evaluating themselves against a simple beginner's test. They are evaluating themselves against the totality of the domain. They know exactly how much they still don't know.
So the bottom quartile is loud and certain because they don't know enough to be scared of the variables, while the top quartile is quiet and hesitant because they see every possible trapdoor.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Dave Hartzell applies this psychological reality perfectly to his 47 years in the trades. He explicitly warns against the overly confident, unhumbled technician who walks up to a machine and guarantees a fix in 5 minutes.
Because that technician is often operating on the beginner side of the Dunning-Kruger curve.
Right. They don't yet have the pattern memory to anticipate the edge cases. Dave argues that the technician you should trust implicitly is the older, quieter one who walks up to the condenser, listens to it, sighs, and says, well, let me look at it first.
Which is funny because we are so culturally conditioned to view hesitation as a sign of weakness or incompetence. We want the loud guarantee.
We all want the quick fix.
But in complex systems, hesitation is actually the ultimate sign of metacognitive awareness. It is the presence of pattern memory, recognizing that variables exist.
Hesitation is the humility of real expertise. And this understanding of humility completely shaped how Dave resolved that intensely stressful situation in the Okarche driveway.
Let's talk about that resolution, because he had a terrified, sweating father who had just wasted 2 days destroying his own air conditioner.
And the industry standard response might have been to just lecture the guy. I mean, a lesser technician might have mocked him for buying the wrong parts, coldly charged a massive diagnostic fee, and aggressively ripped the taped-up wires apart just to prove a point.
But the notes show Dave took a remarkably different approach, one that was totally grounded in the psychology we've been discussing. He recognized the threat to the homeowner's dignity.
Dignity is huge here.
Right. Admitting you don't know something, especially when you are a parent trying to provide a basic necessity like a cool house for a sick child, it feels like a deep threat to your identity.
And Dave actively de-escalated that psychological threat. He didn't walk up to the unit and start unwinding the homeowner's work while the guy stood there defensive and ashamed.
No, instead, Dave asked the homeowner to step away from the machine and just sit with him on the back porch for 10 minutes in the shade.
He gave the man the dignity of space and an honest explanation.
But he didn't sugarcoat the mechanical reality, though.
Not at all. He sat on the porch and explained the physics of the failure. He told him that the undersized contactor would have melted within a month.
He explained why the backward capacitor was an active danger to the life of the compressor.
And why the taped-up control wires needed a completely new run. He was brutally honest that it was now a 6 or 7 hour job, whereas it would have been a standard 3-hour repair if he had been called initially.
The homeowner was probably crushed by that.
Not completely. He was ready to throw away the parts and just surrender.
Yeah.
But Dave managed the financial and emotional damage simultaneously.
How so?
Dave told him exactly which parts were still viable and which could be returned to the online retailer. He billed him fairly for the labor, refusing to punish the homeowner financially for the cognitive trap he had fallen into.
That's incredible.
But the most profound intervention was how Dave reframed the concept of failure. As the homeowner was loading the ruined parts into his truck, swearing heavily that he would never attempt a repair like that again, Dave stopped him.
He told the man that this not knowing isn't a moral failure.
Right. It isn't a personal defect or a sign of stupidity.
It is simply a feature of how human neurology works before learning occurs. Everyone who attempts something entirely outside their domain of expertise walks blindly into this exact gap.
The brain simply cannot evaluate what it does not yet understand.
And Dave removed the shame from the learning process.
He pointed out the ultimate metacognitive takeaway. The moment the customer finally gave up, picked up the phone, and called Dave, that was the breakthrough.
Admitting you are stuck and sourcing someone who actually possesses the pattern memory to bridge the gap.
That is the mind's error correction system finally coming online. Dave used the messy, overconfident fumbling, not as arrogance, but as the difficult, hardwired prerequisite to actual learning. Calling the professional is the ultimate act of metacognition.
So what does this all mean for you, listening to this right now? We started with a sweltering, broken AC unit in an Oklahoma driveway, and we mapped out a psychological blind spot that fundamentally shapes how every single one of us interacts with new information.
We learned that the neurological pathways required to execute a skill are the exact same pathways required to judge whether it was done correctly.
And we explored the danger of the polished sequence, how DIY videos provide the physical choreography of a task while entirely stripping away the pattern memory and troubleshooting friction required to actually succeed.
And we learned that real, verified expertise is usually quiet and hesitant, while inexperience is loud and certain.
So the next time you find yourself 2 hours into what is secretly a 2-day problem, whether you are trying to wire a smart thermostat, write a complex line of code, or navigate a difficult new dynamic in a relationship, give yourself some grace.
Yeah, you haven't failed morally. You have just experienced the mechanics of the Dunning-Kruger effect from the inside.
Meet yourself at the exact moment of learning you're in, just like Dave Hartzell did for his customer on that back porch.
Because the urge to trust our initial confident assessment is incredibly powerful, especially when our media environment constantly feeds us the illusion of simplicity.
Right.
Recognizing that our internal diagnostic tools are limited by our actual experience, that is the difficult, necessary first step toward building true competence.
Which leaves me with a final thought I want you to mull over after this deep dive ends. If we accept the reality of the 1999 Dunning-Kruger findings, if we accept that our brains are fundamentally wired to suppress the error signals when we are trying something brand new, how can we proactively design our daily lives to protect ourselves?
That's a great question.
Think about your media consumption, your financial planning, or your major life choices. How can you intentionally build circuit breakers into your routines? Like predetermined moments that force you to stop and consult a quiet, hesitant expert before you confidently start tearing apart the proverbial wiring of your own life.
Because the flashlight you need to see your own mistakes is usually broken.
Exactly. Sometimes the smartest thing you can do is simply ask someone else to turn on the lights. Keep that in mind the next time the heat rises. Until next time, stay curious.